how to prepare for your first AWS certification in 2020. The last time I created a video like this was about a year and a half ago. A few things have changed since then. So in this video, we'll cover the updated certification tracks. I'll give you some tips on how you can choose the right certification track for you. I'll help you with some prep techniques so you can pass the AWS certification on your first attempt. And finally, I'll leave you with something to think about. Let's start with the obvious question, why an AWS certification? I think this question needs no answer now, it's quite obvious. Number one, AWS is the market leader in cloud computing. More and more companies are moving to the cloud, which means we need more engineers who know AWS, more job opportunities, and also it's a valuable skill to add to your resume. With that being said, once you make up your mind to take an AWS certification, the first question that will come to your mind is, which certification track is the right one for me? AWS has multiple levels of the certification and multiple tracks that you can choose from. Before you narrow down on a specific track, there's two things you should keep in mind. Number one, what's your current role? That is one of the factors that will determine which track is the right one for you. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. The second thing to keep in mind is when you complete the certification, the skill sets that you will acquire, are those skill sets aligned with your career goals? So you want to keep two things in mind when you decide to narrow down on a certification track. What is my current role? And the skill sets that I will acquire, are these the skill sets that I want to add on my resume? If you're brand new to the cloud, if you're brand new to the AWS world, the Cloud Practitioner certification may be the right one for you. It's for people who are new to the cloud and/or AWS, and it focuses on understanding the basic cloud and AWS concepts, the overall architecture and infrastructure of AWS, some of the important services, basic deployment, and operational aspects. Now, if you know a bit of the cloud or a bit of AWS, you might want to directly start with the associate level. At the associate level, there are three different tracks that you can choose from. The first is Solution Architect, the second is SysOps Administrator, and the third one is Developer. Let's talk about the Solution Architect track. The Solution Architect track is primarily for people who are in a design role or an architecting role. It focuses on the major AWS services, use cases, and deployment scenarios. It also focuses on best practices, network, and security features of the different tools available in AWS. So when you pursue the Solution Architect certification, you will understand AWS from a holistic perspective. You will understand the different components of AWS and how they interact with each other. You will also understand how to select a specific AWS service for specific use cases. The next one is the SysOps Administrator certification, which is primarily for system administrators in a system operations role. Here, you'll understand how to deploy, manage, and operate AWS services. You'll understand how to identify required services for specific use cases, cost estimation, and migration. Finally, we have the Developer certification track, which is for people in a development role with some exposure to programming. This track teaches you how to develop, deploy, and debug using the AWS Management Console, the CLI, software development kits, and how to use CI/CD tools. So when you're deciding on a certification track, keep two things in mind. What's your current role and what skill sets do you want to acquire? What if your current role does not match any of these? In my opinion, the Solution Architect exam may be the right one for you. Because it focuses on AWS from a holistic perspective, you will get an idea of the major services, the key services used by AWS, and how to configure them for specific use cases. This information is also available on the AWS certification webpage. You can see the first level is the foundational level, then you have the associate level, and then you have the professional level certification. AWS also has a side track called Specialty Exams, and these are focused on core topics like advanced networking, big data, security, machine learning, and Alexa Skill Builder. From my experience, I can say that these certifications are highly technical in nature. So if you really want to get into the technical details of the core services, the specialty certification may be the right one for you. Once you've decided on a certification track, you will then need to start preparing for the exam. The first step you should do is review the exam blueprint. The exam blueprint is a document that outlines the topics that you should be knowing when you sit for the exam. So start by spending some time on the exam blueprint. Next, subscribe to an online course, or you may choose to self-study with technical documents. There's a lot of courses available on the internet that you can subscribe to, and I highly recommend them because it saves you a lot of time. AWS has done a fantastic job with their technical documentation, so you can choose to self-study, but subscribing to an online course will save you a lot of time by only focusing on the topics that you need to know to pass the exam. So that's highly recommended. Next, you want to make sure that you do the labs. On the examination, a lot of questions are going to represent real-life scenarios. To understand these questions well and answer them correctly, the labs will be very useful. So make sure you do the labs. And finally, before you sit for the exam, make sure you subscribe to practice questions. This will give you an idea of what to expect on the certification exam. Let's talk about strategy to pass. I recommend using multiple iterations to prepare for the exam. On your first iteration, start by preparing notes and take lots of them because these will be handy till you write your exams. So start by preparing notes, use the Getting Started guides available for the different AWS products. FAQs are very useful for preparing notes. Also look at white papers and perform your lab exercises. This is going to be your first iteration. On your second iteration, you want to fine-tune your notes. Make sure you add all the missing points and make your notes as precise as possible. On your second iteration, do your labs but without any help. Look at the configuration scenario and do the lab without any guides, without any help. On your final iteration, which is the third iteration, revise all of your notes one more time and start taking your practice exams. You might have to take the practice exams a couple of times before you start feeling confident. On every iteration, we are covering all the topics. We're going from start to end, but on every iteration, you will feel more confident to pass the exam. Things to keep in mind. Number one, make sure you're allocating a minimum of 1 to 2 hours of practice every day. That's the minimum, and with about 1 to 2 hours of practice, you should be able to pass the exam on your first attempt in 3 months. Prepare in iterations. This will make sure that you cover all the topics on every iteration, and you will also feel very confident by the time you finish your third iteration. And I can't stress this enough, practice exams are an absolute must. Finally, I'm going to leave you with something to think about. Hands-on first, not the cert. AWS certification has become so popular. Every day, we have hundreds and possibly thousands of students passing the AWS exam. As a recruiter, you now have so many people who are AWS certified. I can pick an engineer who is only AWS certified, or I can pick an engineer who is not only AWS certified, but also knows how to apply that knowledge in a real-world scenario. In fact, if you look at the recommended practice for any AWS certification, you will see that AWS recommends hands-on experience as a prerequisite for taking the certification exam. So I highly encourage you to start with hands-on practice, take some configuration scenarios, create an AWS account, look at the documentation of AWS, and try to do some hands-on. Then when you pass the exam, you not only have the certificate, but you're also able to apply that knowledge in a real-world or production scenario. If you found this video helpful, smash the thumbs up to let me know. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. I will look forward to them.